Hello, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. Thank you for joining us for another panel here at Negative Space. This is a great one. Super excited. I feel like Twitter was buzzing last week or so with the whole breaking in line. So very excited to be able to have a conversation about this. Very excited to have two amazing creators here to do so. I'm just going to do a quick pitch. If y'all didn't know, we have a new competition open at Negative Space. We launched it a week ago. This is our fall 2022 competition, open to all writers, all genres. This is the first one that we're hitting our 1-year cycle. So this is starting year 2 of Negative Space. It's the first time a competition is coming back for a second time. So very excited for that one. And of course, I have to mention our Negative Space anthology. Right now we have the campaign up. We are a week in. We are 60% funded, and we have 3 weeks left to just smash that goal. I'll make sure I put the link in the chat. But if you go to Zoop, if you look up Negative Space, or if you look at any of our social media, you'll find the link everywhere. So without further ado, I'm going to bring in Josh, our go-to awesome, amazing host, and he will take over from here. Thank you all, and have fun.
Thank you, Nawal. Those are unnecessary accolades, but I appreciate them. So as Nawal mentioned, I'm Josh Sippie. I'm your host for today. We're going to talk about an eternally useful topic today of breaking into the comic books industry. So without further ado, I want to meet our two guests that are here to talk about this. So first guest, Shobo Coker, is a video game developer and writer of African science fiction and fantasy from Lagos, Nigeria. He co-created the Afrofuturist science fiction comic New Masters at Image, the Kickstarter comic Outcasts of Jupiter, and the all-ages adventure comic BUCKHEAD. He is a recipient of the 2019 Creators for Creators grant and spends much of his time writing comics and video games and researching the mythology, religious concepts, and history of the Yoruba people. Shobo, welcome to the show.
Hey, Josh. Yeah, thank you for having me. Appreciate you getting me on to talk about this. Looking forward to it.
Of course. Yeah, thanks for being here. Anyway, Marla Eizik is an associate editor at TKO Studios. Previously, they acted as talent liaison at Image Comics and a founding member of Comic Book Workers United, the first union for comic book workers. Marla's writing appears in Sky Island Journal, Buckman Journal, and the Maine Review. They are currently writing a novel, a collection of queer erotica, an essay collection on consent, and a really weird comic book. Marla, welcome to the show.
Hi.
Hello there.
Thanks for having me, Josh. This is
Of
so exciting.
course.
And
Yeah,
hi,
this is going to
Shobo.
be great.
Hey, Marla.
So we're going to start at sort of the concept of breaking in because it looks different to different people. So Shobo, I want to start with you. Was there a moment in your creative journey where you felt like you had broken in, or if you haven't yet, what does breaking in look like to you?
Yeah, I will say that how old am I? I turned 40. What year is this? 2023. Wait, it's 2022. It's 2022. I turned 40 in February, and I'd given myself until I turned 40 to get something published, which is probably not a good idea. But for the longest time, I did not think that I would ever be able to get a book published. And I grew up in Nigeria, and comic books looked pretty different in Nigeria in the 80s and 90s. We typically got black and white sort of reprints of Marvel comics. Occasionally we'd get like a color DC book, but they were really hard to come across and they were expensive. So you generally couldn't collect runs or anything like that. You'd get like one-off issues here and there, and you kind of had to fill the rest in. And then in the mid to late 90s, Image kind of broke through, and I was right at the cusp of leaving high school, and I knew that I wanted to tell stories, and I knew that I wanted to do comics. I also knew that there was no way I was going to be able to work to do anything for Marvel or DC or Image or any of the big comic book publishers at the time. So I said, okay, I guess I'm going to have to make a Nigerian comic book imprint. And so, set out with a bunch of my friends to do just that. it didn't work out because I was like 16 or 17 at the time. It didn't work out. And so it, life happened. I went into marketing. I did that for a long while, and I guess kind of gave up on my dream. I was living in the Philippines, and I was pretty happy with my life. I didn't think I was ever going to write comics again, and now I am. And so to say, when do I think that I like actually broke in? I would say I felt a certain sense of validation when I was actually able to walk into a comic book store and pick up a comic that I had written. That's when it felt truly real. Prior to that, I had self-published on Kickstarter. And while that gave me confidence that this was something I could actually do, it was a little bit of a different feeling, I guess. That was more of a direct relationship with fans, and this was a bit more. This was validation from, I guess, like gatekeepers who actually have money on the line, and so that was a kind of a different feeling. And so I guess it wasn't a specific moment. I think it was a bunch of little moments, and all of a sudden you realize that you're doing it, and really, I don't think externally anyone can say when you have actually been able to break in. I think that's something that you, as a creative person, have to feel confidence in your abilities and know that you can do this. Yeah.
Very comprehensive. I'm Marla, what does breaking in look like for you? Like, just sort of explore that idea of what breaking in is. I like what Shobo said about, it's not always one moment, but do you see it the same way?
Yeah, I feel like it's a continuous process. Like, I feel like I'm still kind of breaking in still. Editing has become kind of a way to get further into the industry that I wanted to be in for a long time. A lot like Shobo, like I've always known I wanted to be an author. I've always wanted to be in publishing, but I kind of wasn't sure if that was going to happen for me, mostly because I got my associate's degree, but I didn't go to a 4-year college. I graduated in high school in 2007 and was kind of like, oh, there is a recession happening. I don't want to take out loans. I'm just gonna do what I can. And then I remember I was working as a legal assistant at a law firm, and that got really stressful. Took some time off of that, and I was looking for jobs, and there was like, this was over 5 years ago, there was like a Craigslist ad for an administrative assistant job at a publishing company. And I was like, this sounds like they didn't have any descriptors at all, but I was like, a comic book publisher that's moving from Berkeley to Portland, like this sounds a lot like Image. So I applied and just like crossed my fingers, got the interview, and they hired me. Image hired me. And later on, Kat, who is the director of PR and marketing, said that later, like, none of the other applicants knew that I was actually Image, that I was the only one that had like responded being like, I'm a fan, here's my favorite comic books from Image, So I would say that is a little snippet to y'all watching, like knowing the company that you want to work for, like knowing their background, knowing their books, like actually being a fan. You don't want to be that like intense super fan, but knowing the company that you want to work for is like it's a big part of it. So I was the administrative assistant for a little less than a year. I got promoted to executive assistant, where I was helping Eric, the publisher, kind of go through submissions. That was the main part of my job, was kind of sifting through submissions from the public and picking ones that were excellent, passing those on to the publisher, and doing contracts, managing the previews process, which is like a whole thing. It's like the main way that comic books get marketed, stuff like that. And then moved to Talent Liaison a couple years ago, which was very similar to what I was doing, but we realized that executive assistant made it sound like I was like the publisher's personal assistant, which was like not the case, not picking up dry cleaning or anything like that, just doing the like the stuff that nobody wanted to do in the office basically. But also like having a deep knowledge of like the publication process, moving new creators on. Like I remember when Shobo and Show had new masters come in, and like it was so exciting to, I think that was probably your first, well, not your first creator owned, was it your first after BUCKHEAD?
It was, yes, it was, yeah. BUCKHEAD technically,
Or
BUCKHEAD went into production earlier, but did not come out till, wait, no, yes, BUCKHEAD actually went into production earlier, but I will say like the publishing process, between the difference between Image and Boom in terms of the publishing process is pretty different.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
The creator owned process is pretty confusing, and I feel like Image is like pretty unique in how their terms are set up and how they actually send people through the publication process. So I was helping them with that. And then I just kind of got burned out. I just needed a break. So I quit Image. When was that? That was end of May. And then I've just been doing freelance editing. I got picked up by TKO Studios, which is really exciting. And now I'm an associate editor there. And that's been a dream, just like working on my own books. I love editing, and I've been doing freelance editing for a while, but now I'm in this like official kind of capacity, which has been really fun. And Sebastian Gerner there, the editor-in-chief, is awesome. He's super knowledgeable. He is so deeply ingrained in comics. It's been great. And then I'm also the editor on an Image book, Love Everlasting, which is Tom King and Elsa Charretier, and that's been a joy. I have them here. I just got issue 3, which is on sale today. So everybody go buy that. And then, yeah, also helping out with Negative Space has been really fun. It's a great organization, and I'm really excited for our anthology. But then, yeah, it takes a lot to break in.
and go ahead, Shobo.
Well, I was just going to say, you know, the concept of breaking in. Sometimes when I think about, because I do think about this often, and about kind of how I got started, and I think about the fact that it was partially luck, but you kind of have to be ready for those moments when you get your break. You know, Marla, you mentioned kind of knowing who you're pitching. I will say that at the time I pitched BUCKHEAD, I had, you know, I knew who Boom was, and I knew the kind of books that they published, but I also didn't really know how to pitch a book. And one of the things that I think I was really lucky, because one of the editors there essentially took the time to teach me how to pitch a comic book. Hours and hours, by the way, multiple sessions of like walking back and forth and going through like, here's a process and here's how it works. And that's something that, you know, I think is kind of rare, but I also think I set myself up for success in that I did have that Kickstarter book, which is called OUTCASTS of Jupiter, which I did with with my brother, and it's kind of sort of a precursor-ish to New Masters. And so people were able to pick it up and see that we could finish something, and because we could finish something, they knew that this time was an investment, and so when the moment came, I was able to sort of like seize it, I guess, you know.
And you brought up a lot of good points there that I want to get back to. Since you mentioned Outcasts of Jupiter, there was one thing you had mentioned in the back matter of Outcasts of Jupiter, where you were talking about sort of the development of the story, and you and your brother Shof, you said in the book that you felt like you didn't have the resources required to go the traditional or digital publishing route. What did you mean by that? Like, did you just feel unattainable going that way, and that's why you went the crowdfunding way?
Yeah, I mean, this was in I think it was 2013 when we started working on Outcasts of Jupiter. And we knew what kind of book we wanted to produce. We wanted to make something that, if this was our only shot at ever making a comic, we wanted it to look and feel really good, and for the people who held it to treasure it. And didn't have any money. So like, you know, I love zines and I love self-published books. But we really wanted this to be something special, also because frankly, coming from Nigeria, we have always felt that if we produce stuff, it needs to be able to stand up to the best, to the best quality that you would have somewhere else, so that someone wouldn't pick up a book and say, oh, it's nice for a book from Nigeria, or for you know, that needed to be taken out of the equation. And we didn't have the money, we didn't have the resources, we didn't know anyone in comics, didn't know how to, we knew nothing about the entire process. And so we figured, well, really the only way that we can get this done is if we're able to convince, you know, when you're doing a Kickstarter or a crowdfunded project, it kind of starts small, really, with the people who know you, and friends of the friends who know your friends, because they will trust you and they will, you know, they know that you can do things, and so they'll put money behind your project. And so that's kind of what I meant by that, is that really we didn't have any other options but to go direct to people. I think, you know, there weren't very many digital outlets at the time. Called Comixology Submit was still relatively new. So yeah, we just didn't feel like we had a whole lot of options.
Marla, I want to pick that over to you, because I feel like that's something a lot of writers run into, writers especially, but artists as well, of just feeling like you want to get out there. But I mean, the cool thing about comics, there's so many ways to do it, but they're not always so accessible. So for the writers out there that are just kind of like, this is something I know I want to do, how do I do it? How do they do it? Because, you know, I mean, Shobo gave us one example of, you know, go straight to the people, go straight to the crowdfunding and sort of build it from there. But
yeah,
what else can writers be doing to get themselves out there?
I think having a good artist, taking your time to really find an artist that's going to be perfect for what you're working on specifically. And that can change per project, right? But I can't even tell you how many times I was looking at submissions at Image, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of, like, mostly writers saying, I have this idea, I'm really excited about it, I have the script written up, I don't have an artist quite yet, but I'll get there eventually if you tell me this is a good idea. And like, I get wanting to do that as a writer. If you have a good idea and getting the script out, like, that's so exciting. This stupid script that I'm writing right now, I love it. Is it ready to be shown to a publisher yet? No, not by any stretch of the imagination. And like, I think it's hard for a publisher to take that on blind faith. Like, they want to see the art. And that's the biggest piece of advice that I could give writers or new creators at all, is just wait until you find that artist. Honestly, there's a lot of people that put their portfolios on Twitter. Portfolio Day is a great way to find that hashtag. I've been able to find like a lot of writers or a lot of artists that way, that I can then approach and say, hey, are you interested in doing a book? Do you have time in your schedule? What are your rates? Things like that. And kind of what Shobo said, like, you kind of have to be prepared to spend a little money on it. Like, it's not going to be as easy as if you go to the big two and they arrange everything for you and pay really well. For indie comics, it's gonna take a little bit out of your own wallet, and it's gonna take a little bit of time. And I think you just kind of have to be patient. When I was at Image and looking through submissions, there were so many people that even if they had a pitch package together, there were a lot of times where you could tell they rushed it. They didn't spend money on a colorist or a letterer or whatever, and that's fine. I get that the barrier to entry can be kind of high for young creators to try to back that on their own, and that's why Kickstarter is a great way to do that. It just takes a little time, and talk to your community. I know I'm very lucky to be in a city where there's a lot of creative people here. There's a lot of comic shops, but I think we're lucky also to live in an age where we can like go on TikTok or go on Twitter and find those community spaces there as well. And a lot of people who are looking for work and who also have like done all of this and who are happy to spread their knowledge. Like Shobo and I, like we've done enough to be in this industry, to gather the knowledge that we have. We've been going through it in our lives and also like in our own personal projects. So like we're happy to share that knowledge. Most people, if they have the time, they're happy to give advice like that. So it doesn't hurt to ask people, to like send them a question or to like take advantage of things like this where you can ask questions, because especially for indie comics, like it's kind of a ephemeral, like Image is different from Boom, is different from IDW, is different from Oni. So knowing the publisher that you really want to focus on and then kind of doing your research to find people who can help you kind of break in, or at least give you advice on how to break in, is really the way to do it, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you brought up, go ahead, Shobo.
Oh, well, I was just gonna say that one of the things that I have been extremely lucky with, you know, Marla mentioned find an artist. Would not have been possible if Shof had not decided that he wanted to draw like new masters, because the comic originally, the idea for the comic started when I was going to draw, because I went to art school and I'm a passable artist, but I'm definitely not anywhere near the level of like.
I was gonna say, you're lucky that Shof is such a good artist. Like that, it's so perfect for that book too.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and he is, and that's one of the things that's truly difficult about books, about finding the right artist who, because as a writer, when you have a pitch, particularly if you feel it's something unique or different, or it's from sort of a different point of view, getting somebody who is willing to put in the time and effort to actually search things thematically and make them visually interesting, and derive and look at your inspiration with respect, sort of, is extremely difficult. It's extremely difficult to have that done for free. And I tried the thing a ton of times where you meet someone on a bulletin board and you're like, oh, you like this? I like this. We should be friends. Let's make a comic. That never worked out for me. It works out for some people, but typically what ends up happening is you will have to, and this is entirely fair. You will have to, well, pay the artist, right? Figure out a page rate and actually compensate people for their time. Be generous and be fair as much as you can, because you're trying to make a career out of this. And so, you know, doing it on the cheap, you know, one thing I've learned about this industry is that everyone kind of knows everyone, and sort of word gets around. So if you're just not good to work with, then eventually it's going to come back. So just try to treat people the way you would like to be treated, you know?
And I think especially from the writer standpoint, like that tends to be, if there is kind of a power dynamic that's a little unfair in comics, it's definitely the writer versus artist. And I always really appreciate those writers who take time to call out their artists and get them paid, because, like, you know, it takes a lot of work to write a comic, but good God, the amount of hours that goes into drawing it is insane. And they should be compensated for sure.
Yeah, and not to like carry on, but not just the artist. That's one of the things that has been amazing to me about people who have to touch a comic before it actually gets done. At Image, worked with a book designer, for instance, and the back and forth and like getting colors right, the letterers, all the people who do on the marketing side of things, and where it takes a village, and it would really help you in your career to try and know as many of the people at every level who work on your book and understand what they do and appreciate it, because at some point you're probably going to need their expertise.
Yeah.
And I want to get back to something, Marla, that you had touched on. I think Shobo, you mentioned it as well, but when it comes to breaking in, there are some amorphous concepts out there, like breaking in itself, and like this concept of when you're actually ready to break in. And Marla, especially being a quote unquote gatekeeper where you see pitches, how do you assess when a creator is ready, either a writer or an artist? Is there something about it that just stands out from the pack?
Yeah. I thought about that a lot, because it does kind of feel, it is kind of like a feeling based thing. Like the difference is, before I left Image, I with the creator's permission, I took a couple pitches that we had received that pretty immediately, both Eric and I were like, there's something special here. And it really does come down to, especially at Image, having a pretty finished product. I don't know exactly how like Boom's submission or acquisition stage happens, but it's also true at TKO. We want to see something that's pretty finished. A lot of times people will send over sketches or ideas, like kind of what I was talking about before, like kind of just the idea stage. And that tells me that while the writer or the creator is excited about this book, they haven't totally taken it to that like marketable stage yet. And we kind of, as much as comics are like this beautiful, creative, artistic industry, it's also a business. So we kind of want to see, is this ready to be on the shelf? Is it going to look as good as the next book on either side? Like, is it going to have the covers been kind of figured out? Has the creative team been locked in? That's an important part. Like Shobo was saying, there's so many people that touch that book, and on the specific creative team for that comic, is your colorist and letterer and editor all locked in? Are they going to be there for the long haul of the series? You kind of have to like go, when you pitch to a publisher, you kind of have to pretend this is going to be greenlit tomorrow. And are you ready to kind of take that step? And if I see a pitch package that is, they have this series plotted out, they have the next 5 issues written and hopefully drawn or on their way to being drawn. If I can tell that the team is in it and they're excited about this book and they're ready to go on that journey, then that kind of tells the publisher, like, this is going to be worth it financially, honestly, because they do kind of have to think about that. And is it at the level, and especially is the art at the level where it's going to be sellable, basically? And like, if I show this to somebody at Comic-Con, are they going to be like, oh yeah, that looks so good, like that's different from what I'm seeing, and also this art is grabbing me, it's kind of, it's polished, it's professional looking, while also being something new for people. You really do kind of have to take an extra second and really think about what you're submitting to publishers, especially people or companies like Image, where they have open submissions. It's very tempting to just like throw whatever at the wall at their email. But honestly, yeah, it's when you have that finished product, it looks so good and it jumps out so clearly among like the entire slush pile, for sure.
And then Shobo, I want your take on that too, because I mean, I'm speaking for myself. I'm so eager as a writer. I'm somebody who's like, let's get it done. If I see an open submission, I always think, is it too early? So I'm
Yeah.
wondering from your point of view, like, how do you know when a project, especially whenever it's, you know, potentially that first one that could break you, and how do you know when that project's ready? And how do you know when you're just being overeager?
Yeah, I think that's a great question because as a writer, I also get extremely excited about things for about 10 minutes, right? Like when you have that concept and idea, it's everything you can think about, and you're so focused on it. One thing that I've learned is that ideas are kind of a dime a dozen. There's always going to be another idea. So what I end up doing is just kind of putting them all, when the ideas come, I flesh them out as much as possible and put them into a doc. And when I know one is ready to actually be pitched is when I truly feel that there's a concrete story in there that I'm going to be excited about for more than that's just like 10 minutes. It has to be because now I know that I'm going to be living with this for, in the case of New Masters that was published with Image, it was something like a year and a half, I think, or thereabouts, something like that. So it's going to be a while. And in terms of what what you actually, when you say, okay, I'm ready to submit, I think earlier Marla mentioned kind of knowing who you're working with. If it's Boom, what they expect is going to be pretty different from what Image expects. Marla mentioned that Image prefers something more kind of complete. And when we submitted to Image, circumstances were a little bit different because we had won the creators grant, but at the same time we had the complete Outcasts of Jupiter Kickstarter book, which was about, I think, something like 30 pages of story and about 10 or 15 more pages of back matter that kind of told a self-contained story and fleshed out the world and the characters. So hopefully anyone who picked it up could see that we had a pretty strong and complete concept. Some other areas, it's okay for you to submit a synopsis and kind of like a brief breakdown of what each of the following issues are going to be, and some, provide some comps and some artwork, just a little bit of artwork, and that's okay. You kind of have to do your research a little bit and maybe ask around, what does this publisher expect? Because again, I'm not 100% sure, but my impression is that submitting something like that would generally not really fly with a place like Image, especially since this is the first time that you're going to be published. You have to, again, like, you want to be overqualified to a certain degree, so that when people look at your book, they get the confidence, because they're going to spend probably tens of thousands of dollars at the very least, publishing, marketing, and when you think about all the person hours that go into producing this book, it's not an insignificant sum of money. So while you might be excited and really want to push that submit button, like, treat it as basically be over prepared.
Yeah,
that's what I think.
exactly. And it's tricky too, because it's different than like the literary world, where you can go through an agent and, I mean, you have your novel ready, but you're just kind of pitching an idea to them, and that's all they want. They want just that query letter. But there were so many times at Image and TKO also where people will say, I have this idea, and yeah, like you're saying, we need a little bit more because it's so visual, it's so important to have that.
So that I want to shift gears a little bit, because there's, especially nowadays, I feel like there is one universal that a lot of editors say you should be doing to break in, and that is to get short work out there before you go in for a full-length project. So I wanted to get both your takes on that. Marla, starting with you, because you are an editor. So I'm curious if that is something that you feel like all writers should be doing. You already touched a bit on connecting with artists and sort of getting that team together. Does the same apply for short comics, and where can people look to sort of push it out there? Does it matter where it's published, or does you just want to see a good product?
Yeah, totally. I think that's essential for sure. There's been different teams where they've broken in and they didn't have anything else published. It's definitely doable. But I think having that short piece out there kind of shows, even if it's just like a little zine, even if it's like a small press, that just shows, hey, I finished this thing from beginning to end. I had this concept in mind and I executed it. Like Shobo was saying earlier, you know, it's a year and a half of like working on this book. Do you have kind of the patience and the endurance to just stick with one project and get it out there? Are you able to do the like kind of peddling and the self-marketing that you have to do as like a comics creator? That's why I love organizations like Negative Space, because y'all are doing, there's not enough platforms for creators who don't have any work out there to get their names out there, and they're so talented. Like the writing competition that I got to judge, Mia's story was instantly, I was just like, I want to see more from this creator. And there's so many people that are like that are winners of these competitions where I'm like, they're on my radar now. Like I would love to see their work out there on the shelves, and I think that they will. They just need that little in. So yeah, self-publishing is a great way of doing that. Kickstarter is also, you know, they're really leading the way, and there's so many like bigger creators that are even doing that too, getting work that it's like a passion project that might not work for the publishing company they're working for already. Like, yeah, that's a great way to do it. And people like me, I know that there's other editors that also check the new projects that are on Kickstarter. I'm always kind of like seeing if there's anything new out there that I want to back that could eventually go to TKO, or when I was at Image, I was always looking at new submissions there too, and also just having a presence. I know it sucks to like be on social media, it's no fun, but even just having, if you're an artist, like putting sketches out there, process art, it doesn't necessarily have to be published things. If it's a secret project you're working on, you don't have to put everything out there, but just showing that you're doing this daily or weekly, like showing that this is kind of the world that you want to be immersed in, and then showing up at shows, like that's, having a presence is also important for sure.
Shobo, was that sort of your mindset? You know, you've walked us through the creation of Outcasts of Jupiter. Was that sort of what you were going for there? Is it just sort of have a product out there that you could point to and be like, look, this is what I can do?
Yeah, it absolutely was. And the reality, I feel like I should say, you know, Outcasts would have failed. We would not have hit our goal if it hadn't been for the social presence of, oh my gosh, I've forgotten who it was. LaShawn Thomas, who did Cannon Busters and Afro Samurai. So you talk about like the importance of having a social media presence. He saw the project and was like, this looks really cool. And all of a sudden we went from no way we're going to make it to actually making it. But just being able to complete that book gave us as creators a lot of confidence. And when it was done, I knew that I wanted to keep the momentum going. At the same time, I knew that Shof was not going to, because of his day job, he just was not going to be able to do something new. So I said, okay, well, let me do this. Let me find other platforms and let me write something new. And I wrote a kind of like a middle grade follow-up of sorts, sort of companion piece to Outcasts of Jupiter, which is called Under a Jovian Sun. And we pretty much took it off the internet. But like the internet is forever, so you can probably find it somewhere. But we did put it on, we put it on Tapas, we put it on Webtoons, we had it on Tumblr, we created a WordPress site, we created a website, cokercoop.com, which we don't really update that often anymore. But at the time, we were posting kind of process sketches and kind of showing like talking about the lore and showing how characters are designed, and basically just trying to any way we could to drum up interest and get eyeballs on things. And it was a short, small. It was something that I think we published a few pages a month. So probably not with the regularity that we needed to, but like Marla said, if you are consistent, what that does, I think, is that if people are even a little bit interested, it's kind of, we're in the age of content, right? And people will go anywhere they need content. And when they're done with like their premium top tier content that they really want to watch or they really want to see or whatever, then they start going to the places that post regularly. So that's a way of getting eyeballs. And I'm not an editor, but my impression is that editors, even though it feels like they aren't necessarily going to those places, they're going to all of those places because they're trying to find. One thing as a creator to understand is that they want you to succeed. And I say they, I mean comic book publishers and individual editors behind them. Actually, they want your work. They want you to be good. It's like when you go in for a job interview, you kind of feel like the pressure is on you, the person. They really want you to come through because it makes their life easier. And recognizing that and helping to bridge that gap. I think it makes things a lot easier for everyone. So yeah, sure. I love the idea of anthologies. I have not been able to contribute to one yet. I would love to, because they're manageable chunks of work, and they are complete things that you can have a complete thing, and there's a sense of, again, haven't contributed to one, but there's a sense of sort of camaraderie of like all these artists and writers coming together to produce. Absolutely, yeah. Hit me up now, Well.
I was gonna say, negative space probably is the place for you.
100%, yeah. But there's that sense of artists and writers and coming together to create this thing. So you're not alone. You have support, and it's a really great way to, because the best way to understand the process is by doing, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And I will say too, as an editor trying to find work that is good and also from underrepresented people, like we don't want to go to big two creators. We don't want to see the same 5 white guys doing the same thing over and over. So we're gonna go to people that have published work, maybe have done an anthology, artists who have like maybe done some cover work, have done like a smaller sequential project, but like we know that they haven't had their break yet. I know myself and other editors are always looking for that. We're always looking for who is going to be the next awesome artist, because we want those fresh voices. We want the people that haven't been discovered yet. And also like it is a lot easier to book those people because their schedules are free and like we can work with them easier than a super established artist or writer. So just know that we are looking for you. We are always lurking and trying to find that talent. So yeah.
And I want to get back to something that we talked about a little bit earlier, but sort of, finding the right channels for assistance, because comic books, breaking into comic, like we said, there are a lot of ways to do it. It's not always clear which way is the right way. And there's not a lot of education out there, I feel like, for new writers that really want to find their way into this. So I want to sort of just get both your thoughts on the role of mentorship, on just general guidance. I mean, the people that are here listening, you found this, which is a great start, but Shobo, I want to start with you because you had mentioned that, when you had pitched Image, you didn't really know how to pitch a book, and there was somebody there that sort of helped you do that. So were you seeking ways to learn how to get into the industry, or were you kind of just, learning as you went along the way?
So it was Boom, not Image.
Boom.
But yes, at the time, scouring the internet, trying to find how to write a comic book pitch, how to write a comic book script, and the reality, like one thing, just calm down. There is no standard way of doing it. Like to a certain degree, you kind of have to go with your gut and say, okay, what story am I trying to tell? And kind of sort of format your pitch that way. But yeah, I was definitely just trying to find any kind of information online that would help, and there wasn't a whole lot. What I will say again is that if you are able to produce work, you'll probably get noticed. And if you're able to produce work and it's good work, then you will get noticed and you will have people who are willing to offer help. Like one of the things that I have been so grateful for is the fact that Daphne Plebon at Boom, who was the person who saw Outcasts of Jupiter on New Masters, reached out and said, hey, this is really interesting. And we ended up not publishing with Boom, but I worked with Daphne for months afterwards. You know, she helped kind of sort of refine my pitch process and let me know, kind of sort of showed me the ropes and introduced me to other people within Boom. And when we won the Creators for Creators grant, Nick Dragata, who does East of West, just spent a lot of time answering emails and walking us through this. And at one point, yeah, that's really awesome, right? At one point, Kyle Higgins, I think he called us up sort of out of the bluish almost, right? Not quite out of the blue, but almost, and kind of, you know, gave us his time and kind of told us about the publishing process and about just understanding the ins and outs of what happens when you're publishing a comic. Because the reality is that most people don't have that information, and there are very few places that you can go to and actually find out what things like page rates are. When are you going to get paid? What are IP rights? How do the various publishers deal with them? The business side of things, the things that generally I think creatives don't really care to involve themselves with, but really should do more. And there are so many other people as well who have, you know, Margaret Stoll, who did a bunch of work, who's done like so much work with Marvel, right? For several months, just coaching me on things like basic things like story structure, right? How do you tell a story, and things like that. They give you valuable knowledge, but they also make you believe that I can do this. Like if these people are actually spending their time to help me, then I must be able to do this. And that kind of, for certain people, you know, there are lots of people who have self-confidence. I do not. My superpower is not believing in myself. So, you know, that kind of thing is extremely helpful. And, you know, I'm hopeful that I will be in a position to, I guess, pay that forward at some point, you know?
I'm glad you brought up the structure of a comic book script, because whenever I found comic book writing all those years ago, that was the first thing that scared the hell out of me, because I was like, what do you mean there's no universal way to do it? Like, that's just terrifying to me. But Marla, I want your take on that as well. The whole search for guidance, for mentorships. You know, I know a lot of writers, you know, we're always seeking sort of somebody to be like, look, here's the way you do things. That's not there for everybody. So where can people look to find the information they need, the pathway they need to go down?
Well, let's see. When I was still working at Image, when I was kind of thinking about doing more structured freelance editing and kind of pivoting towards that. So I, like Shobo, also have the gene of like, I don't think I am good at this, so I don't want to talk to people about it, but I kind of just bit the bullet and I reached out to Will Dennis, who's the editor on a bunch of books. He is like, I think he has the most titles at Image, like being an editor. It's him and Joel Enos, like and Kyle Higgins, like all of them just have a million books they're working on at once. And I kind of just asked Will, if you wouldn't mind like spending a little time explaining to me like the process of editing and of kind of doing that on your own. And he was super generous with his time. We talked for a few hours on the phone, and he kind of just told me how he does it, what he learned at Marvel, and the different people that he's talked to, and kind of the business side of it, but also more of just how to talk to creators, how to get more creators, how to kind of, from the editing side, seeing what teams have potential, and then also just need project management. Like there's a ton of creators who are so talented either at writing or editing or doing art, being an artist. That is their full-time job, but the business side of it is so confusing. And also just like the editing for the project itself. Like they're like, I know that this issue isn't quite working, but I don't know why it's not working. And as an editor, seeking those teams out and offering help, he kind of talked me through how to approach teams like that. Another person that I talked to is Heather Antos. Like she's all over the place too. She's doing so much work, and just kind of like swallowing my pride and being like, look, I'm new to this. I don't really know what I'm doing. What did you learn? There's a lot of people who have posted their experiences online about that. Like, honestly, when I was starting to write comic scripts too, I just like looked at a bunch of established creators' blog posts. Gail Simone, I think, also has like a comic school, which is super helpful. Just like, it just has the formatting stuff that I need somebody to tell me, like the technical side of like, this is what kind of what you're talking about, Shobo, like this is what a script looks like. Although I will say, there's all this information out there. There's still people like Tom King who literally, I saw one of his scripts and it's just like panel one thing, like dialogue, like that's it, like no description. Like it can be as bare bones as you want. It really comes down to the relationship you have with your artist too. So like, I know a lot of people are so worried about, how the script looks, but it's going to be different for each project and for each person. But I feel like in the comics community, especially, there's a lot of gatekeeping that kind of information. And you just have to find the people that are willing to share that. And I think a lot of people are. Like, I have a author friend who is like mostly just on the literary side of things, but had a friend who was trying to get into comics, and they just put us together. And same with somebody else who is in the video games industry, and they were trying to break into comics, and just like connecting, like being the person that people know, like you know that person in the community is connecting other people in the community. Finding people like us who are willing to kind of open those gates a little bit and make it not such a fuzzy process. Because I think some people like to make comics fuzzy on purpose, and it doesn't need to be. It's just funny books at the end of the day, and we're always happy to share the advice.
So we're just about out of time, so I just want to pass it back to each of you real quick. If you could give just one piece, you've given so much good advice already, but if I were to say, what is one thing that people out there that want to break in, writers, artists, whatever part of the process they want to break in, what is one thing you would tell them to do? And it can be simple, it can be complex, whatever you want it to be. Shobo, let's start with you.
For me, it's pretty simple. It's just finish something. I think it's for me, it's the hardest thing to do, just because, like I said, there's so many ideas. They come a million miles an hour. Just finish something, and it will give you confidence. It will help you understand the process. When you're done, you'll be able to, and I don't just mean the mechanical process of putting a book together or the technical process, but you'll be able to understand yourself as a creative, because you can look at it and all you'll see are the problems with it, which is a good thing, because you are able to see what you need to, like, how you if you're self-critical, then you can improve on the next one. But that thing that you finished, if it's good enough, you'll be able to kind of like show it to people and say, here, this is what I have made. And those people can see it, and they will then trust you, and they will be willing to back you and put money behind a project that you. But like for me, that's the most important thing. Is like being able to actually finish something.
Marla, what about you?
I think kind of jumping off of that, like if there's one thing that you love doing, focus on that. If you're really into sci-fi, if you're a writer and you're into sci-fi, you want to write that sci-fi story, but you're kind of trying to get into these other genres that you think might sell better or might be more marketable, don't do it. Just focus on the thing that you love doing and it will come out. Like if you're trying to get into editing and there's a specific publisher that you have your eye on, be available to them. Keep an eye on what they're doing, have your presence be known, and also just like don't try to spread yourself too thin with all these other little projects yet. Like what Shobo was saying, you just want to like focus on that one thing, be good at that one thing, and that's kind of how, if you focus that way in, like people will see that and they will be like, that is the person that I need to talk to, and it just goes on from there.
And then last but certainly not least, I want to give you both a chance to promote stuff that you have. If you have books handy, if you have social media platforms where people can find you online, throw it all out there. Marla, we'll start with you. What's going on?
Well, there's this cool anthology that I'm helping edit right now. Go back our Kickstarter. Yeah. Tell your family and friends. I'm really excited for this anthology. I think it's going to be great. It's going to be so much fun. And it already looks so good. I love the cover. It's so cute. And Love Everlasting at Image. Go buy it. It's an adorable series and it's getting intense. The third issue just came out and we have, I think, like 3 arcs already figured out, and it's only going to get more wild from here. And also, if anybody's watching this and has more questions about the comics process, feel free to reach out to me. I think I'm Meowla13 on Twitter, but the Negative Space will have my contact info, and I'm always happy to answer questions for people, for sure.
Awesome. Shobo, how about you?
Yes, I do have a couple of things. So I guess first I will mention BUCKHEAD, let's see, which is now out on fantastic paperback from Boom. It's a really awesome comic book that I wrote about a Nigerian immigrant kid who moves to a small, creepy town in the Pacific Northwest, and kind of like sort of the parents start disappearing and getting replaced by robots, and he has to kind of get to the bottom of that mystery. And it was a ton of fun to get that done. Yeah. So that came out last month on paperback, and then this month, next week, check that out. Oh, come on, you can do it. Here we go. It's New Masters, which is out on trade paperback next week. This is a comp from Image, but yeah.
Yay! Oh, it looks so good.
I know. It's like it's really cool to just like have it collected. Look at that. It's got like a bunch of back matter in there, which can't see because the blur is on. But yeah, like all that back matter stuff about the building of the world.
Wow.
Really proud to get that together. And if you want to reach out and if you have questions about pretty much anything comics related, you can send me those questions at Shobo Coker on Twitter. I'm happy to answer and like sometimes like provide way too much information because I ramble, but you know, yeah.
Same.
Awesome. Yeah, and if I can throw a vote of confidence to New Masters, he does your back matter is the best of any book I've seen. Like the world building is just phenomenal. So just wanted to throw that in there. But thank you both so much for being here. This was a great conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Oh, thank you so much, Josh.
Of course.
Nawel.
Yes, Nawel back there behind the scenes. All right, well, we'll see you all in 2 weeks. We've got another one coming up in 2 weeks, October 26th, I think, but check the Negative Space website just in case, and we'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
See ya.